What's up everyone, welcome back to a brand new Resident Evil Village DLC discussion video. Today we're going to be going over the final major kind of potential DLC that could come with Village later in the year, or later next year whenever they decide to release. And this is one that a lot of people kind of want because through trailers and, you know, everything prior to release, these characters seemed like a big deal, but when you got to the game, they were all kind of gone within the first hour. Or even half an hour in the launch game of things. Like, they were dead very, very quickly. But these are the villagers. Obviously you meet them all in Louise's house in the beginning, and then everything goes wrong. But there's even like little snippets in the trailers of different scenes with them in it. So who knows? I have a few ideas to run past everyone to kind of give an idea of what they could do. Again, this is all pre-game or during the game. Although maybe not during the game with these guys, but pre-game is the best way to do this, I believe, because you know the fates of all of these characters in the main story. You know what happens to them all. So doing something separate that's going on during the game with anyone that isn't Chris is kind of irrelevant, because you see what happens to these characters all the time. So this is going to be pre-Ethan, this is before he turns up. And yeah, a couple ideas to run past, so if you're excited, be sure to leave a like, and remember to subscribe for more Resident Evil content and turn notifications on for streams at weekends and stuff like that. So, let's jump into it. So my first initial idea is how they all individually got to Louise's house at the beginning of the game. Obviously you get to the village as Ethan, and you hear over radio that if anyone's still alive out in the village, come to Louise's house in the farm, or something like that. And when you get there, there's obviously about 6 or 7 people there already. And that's interesting, because it would be really cool to see, maybe not all of them, because, you know, that'd be quite a bit of DLC, but to see how some of them ended up getting there. Obviously there's Eleanor, who is kind of the one that was in the trailers the most, I believe that's her name. And people thought she was going to be a big deal in the game, because there was obviously scenes in the trailers of her that never made it into the game, which is interesting. It's weird, but it will most likely, if there was going to be a Villager DLC, be around her. Obviously her dad is there as well, and he's been like scratched or bit by a werewolf, and he turns into one shortly after getting there. So we could see the events of, you know, how they got from where they were to Louise's house, what happened to him, and then obviously it ends with her getting to Louise's house. Well, she doesn't actually get into the house, but she gets into like a little side barn. Safely and away until Ethan turns up and gets them into the house together. You can also follow obviously the other villagers in the house. Obviously there's the other guy that kind of makes a fuss about Ethan being there, because and Eleanor's Eleanor, wherever one it is, her father's there and he's been bit, so he's not exactly on board with an outsider and an infected person being in the house with them. And he is also drunk, so maybe that'll be an interesting DLC to play through, where he's drinking and trying to escape with the Lycans and get to safety, or something like that. But yeah, there's many other characters. Louisa as well is a very interesting character. I do remember in the trailer, there was a brief like kind of glimpse at her character, and they kind of made it look like a Woman in Black type. You know the horror film Woman in Black. Like, they kind of made her look like that kind of enemy, but she turns out to be really friendly. But I would wonder if that idea was changed, because in the trailer, the first trailer for the game, you can go check it out, there's just a brief glimpse of her and it looks very ominous. So maybe they changed it last second. But either way, seeing the villagers get to Louise's house in their own individual ways would definitely be something interesting to see. Probably my most likely idea, because obviously at the end of the day we don't know what they're doing, but the idea I would kind of like to see more is loosely based off of Resident Evil 7's DLC plans. If you remember, the first 2 DLCs before the Zoe DLC came out, and they were bundled in these like banned footages, where it was videotapes of things that happened, again, prior to the game, the events of the game for the most part. Some of them are obviously mini games, but the story ones there were prior to the events of the game. Imagine the same thing, but obviously maybe it's like, instead of banned footage, it's like tales from the village or something like that, and it's like narrated instead of being like essentially watched on a tape. And when you play the DLC, maybe it could be narrated by the Duke, because obviously he's a interesting character and you don't actually see his death like he could have survived, and he probably did, because there is kind of a discussion within the the village community in the minute that obviously originally he was a lord, but they scrapped that idea and turned him into a merchant. And when Ethan talks to him at the end, he asks like what he is, who he is, and he doesn't even know. Like, he can't answer that. And there's a lot of kind of ideas people have that he's some kind of god that's kind of like just there to, I don't know why, maybe just to gain off of people who are in bad situations or something like that. That was one of the ideas. But there is a rumours that he's like a higher power than the lords, and he's more supernatural than they are. So that'd be interesting, just to have him narrate it, or maybe even the characters it's about narrate it as they go, or who knows, maybe it's someone's like, I don't know, maybe someone's just telling a story around the campfire or something like that, but who knows. Now, what was good about the band footages in Resident Evil 7 is they were all kind of separately themed. Just to go over a few, there was obviously the Daughters one, which was the kind of the big prequel to the events of the game, where obviously it showed Jack bringing Evelyn to the house, and then everyone slowly turning into these manipulated mold monsters by the end. That was like more of the story. It was more horror. And then you have 21, which was like a card game, but it was very loosely based off of like a Saw movie. Like they weren't, it wasn't horror, but it was kind of like grim and a bit violent, but it wasn't horror. And then there was ones like Nightmare, which was like a survival mode where you had to build scrap to upgrade weapons. You were playing as Clancy, who was one of the sewer gators who turned up at the beginning of the game, the ghost hunters. And you had to survive waves of molded by turning on scrap machines and using that to upgrade your weapons and stuff like that, which was super cool. There was Bedroom, which was my personal favourite one, where you were, again, playing as Clancy, and you were trapped on a bed, and you had to escape Marguerite as in any way you could. And essentially what you had to do was you find things in the room and move things in the room, and then at certain points, you moving something or picking up something would cause a noise, and then she would basically come back to the room and you'd have a timer.
Yeah,
and what you'd have to do in that time
but
is put everything back the way it was before she comes in, else you take damage, and if you fail that a couple more times you'll die. But that was super cool, super intense, because you'd always forget to put the one thing in the right place, or you'd be paranoid that you didn't. And I really liked that DLC. But yeah, there you go. Like, there's plenty of options for like a villages stories in the village DLC, because there's plenty of characters that we've never really used, and there's plenty of ideas you could go off of. Like, one could be scary, one could be action, one could be puzzles.
It's too good.
It could be anything. Like, I'd love to see a variation of DLC like that, especially if it's loosely based around some of the villages in the game. But obviously this is all my ideas. Another thing you could do, maybe, is
I could.
This is a horror-based one I have. Maybe you play as a random villager who is like one of the first Lycans, and they're slowly turning into one, and you have to kind of experience that. I don't know. Like, there was a lot of ideas they had with Lycans that were cut from the game. One was that they would all kind of drink from this chalice in like Miranda's lab area, and they'd all turn into one slowly. One was that they'd all like willingly go to Miranda and she'd cover them in mold. Essentially cocoon them in mold, and then when they came out they were Lycans. So there was plenty of ideas that were kind of touched on.
What's the rate on it?
But for the most part, it just seemed that Miranda experimented on literally everyone in the village for the most part, and they all turned into Lycans. Or it was supposed to do with the
that's been out a while now.
Castle itself that did that. And then obviously getting bit or scratched by one of these things does turn you into one as well, which we figure out in the game from Eleanor's dad. But yeah, just to kind of wrap up, obviously the two ideas were kind of, one, show them all trying to get their own way to Louisa's house at the beginning, different journeys for each of them. Maybe it's 2 or 3 of them, like, it could be Eleanor and her dad, it could be the drunk guy, it could be the, looks like a maiden lady. I don't know if she escaped the castle, maybe it was the maiden from the maiden demo that escaped the castle. That'd be interesting to see. And then second, obviously, the kind of village stories, around the campfire stories or something like that, where you kind of see different things happening across the village to different people. Obviously, the tone could be anything, like I said, horror, action, puzzles, something new, who knows? But yeah, this has been my idea for kind of Villages DLC. There's not many of these videos left to come out. There's a couple more characters I want to touch on briefly. And then, at some point, probably next week, maybe, I want to briefly touch on some of the, well, the two main kind of story arc theories for RE9, and that's super far away, but there's a lot of talk about it going on, so I kind of want to throw my name into the ring and discuss what people are saying and, you know, how likely it is to be the case. But yeah, this has been a DLC video for the Villages. Next up will probably be Mia, probably, because obviously she's in the game.
Oh wait,
A
you're
lot
talking
more
about
than you think.
the old topic about
But
Crash.
that'll be, again, in a couple of days' time, tomorrow. Interesting discussion video tomorrow, actually, about Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about Crash.
Actually, a lot of things I want to say about
Fights,
that
I was
game
like, wait a minute.
tomorrow, so it might be a bit longer than 10
I've heard that
minutes,
before.
but we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, thank you for watching. Again, leave a like and leave a comment down below what you think of a potential Villages DLC and what you would like to see. And of course, again, subscribe for new daily Resident Evil content and streams and weekends, and turn notifications so you don't miss a thing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow.